crosses are you bearing this morning? What crosses are you bearing? It means different things to different people to carry a cross. And sometimes people try to talk us out of it, right? Peter did the same. Oh, no, wait a minute, Jesus, wait. What do you mean you're going to have to hang on the... What do you mean you're going to have to die? No. Let's not do that. That sounds way too horrible. That's way too painful. Let's not go there. But we know sometimes we have to do the hard things. Sometimes we have no choice but to live through the hard things. Sometimes we can be a martyr with the cross to bear. Have you ever had somebody like that? I had someone, not in my family, but someone that I used to know years ago, and that was their thing, that they would say, well, that's my cross to bear, right? And so sometimes that we can kind of, unfortunately, take that on as like a martyr's stance. I'm the peacemaker, I'm the caregiver, these are the circumstances in my life, that's my cross to bear. But again, if we look sometimes, even if we just kind of flip the switch of the way that we're viewing things, well, that is a cross to bear, certainly. And again, I've been a caregiver, and I usually am a peacemaker. So, and I know many of you are too. But then, if you kind of keep with that attitude of that's my cross to bear, then again, you become the martyr, right? And it's a negative thing. Well, I really dislike this, but I guess I have to do this. But if you flip the view just a bit, you can see what a privilege it can be to be a cross bearer for other people. Because sometimes we carry the cross for other people very often. And again, if we can view it in that way, it's a completely different way of looking at it. Thank you, God, that I am able to do this for my loved ones or for others that I care about. But sometimes we do carry a cross that doesn't seem to benefit anyone, and it's just a cross that we have to bear. Jesus is very clear in the scriptures across the board that life and following Jesus is not going to be a smooth ride. Would never be a smooth ride. And Jesus himself chose not the easy way, but the hard way through life. So to take up the cross is in some ways to lose your life, because you are taking on the burden of someone else or for someone else. And maybe it's not just one person. Maybe it's a group of people. Maybe it's just through circumstances, again, that you're taking on that cross. And part of that is freeing in a way, although it's kind of opposite maybe than what we would expect, because we can let go of certain expectations, right, of safety or acceptance to go, I'm standing for what I believe in, and it's right here, and to be able to do that. And sometimes we don't have that opportunity, or we don't take that opportunity, and very often we aren't asked to do that, I guess, except through the scriptures. When's the last time somebody's walked up to you and said, hey, Robin, what do you stand for, right? Or Jackie, what do you believe in, right? I mean, people don't really usually have those kinds of deep conversations. But if we do, sometimes it makes us think, oh, wow, what do I believe in? And very often we don't really get to those, rubber meets the road type moments. Usually, right, it's some... an emergency, right, or some unexpected thing that happens in life that we just have to suddenly decide, how am I going to react to this? Am I going to react this way or react this way? Am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And very often am I going to do this easy thing will make me happy, or am I going to do this much harder thing where I'm going to maybe have to have hard discussions with people, or I'm going to have to actually share and stand up for what I believe in? And maybe it's not going to be the best thing for me, but I need to actually stand up for what Jesus would want me to do. So that's a question that we need to be asking ourselves. How are we to take up the causes of Jesus for justice and righteousness and mercy in our day? Jesus in Mark 8:31, that Nancy read, thank you, Nancy, again, for being liturgist. For the very first time in the Gospels, we read that Jesus is just super upfront about the reality of the suffering that's going to be involved not just to him, but to those who are following him. And he speaks of taking up one's cross and also denying themselves. And again, that's not a popular message, is it, nowadays, to deny yourself? Instead, we hear all the time the opposite. Oh, if it feels good, do it. If you want that, go ahead. It doesn't matter. Nobody will notice if you had to lie or cheat or steal. No, it's okay, right? The world has all these little caveats, and then again, we just kind of feel, this one time, and then pretty soon we know it's not just one time. So denying ourselves is a difficult thing, isn't it? Especially if we are used to kind of getting what we want a lot of the time. So you knew at some point I was going to get over to our hot air balloon visual, right? Well, we're talking today, one of the things that Marcia McPhee mentions in her notes is to talk about the idea of ballast. So I looked up ballast to make sure that I was going to knew more about it. So ballast is the word for anything that's used to add weight to a floating vessel, whether it be a ship on the sea or a hot air balloon in the sky. Extra weight can provide stability, and it can also affect the speed or the buoyancy of the vessel as well. So I thought I'd throw out a couple other facts while I was researching. So here's your history lesson for today. The first hot air balloon flight was on September 19th, 1783 in Versailles. So I was kind of surprised it was that long. I knew they did tethered ones, but I was kind of surprised at an actual flight. And also, maybe you didn't know this either, but hot air balloons were originally propelled not by heating the air, but by releasing helium or hydrogen. The gases being less dense than air then generated the lift to bring the balloon upward. And then these gas balloons then were outfitted with sandbags, like the picture that we just showed you earlier, these sandbags that would provide ballast. And then when the pilot wanted to gain altitude, he would just simply, or she, but it was probably mainly he, pilots at that time, would just throw the sand overboard or just cut the rope, right, and let it fall down to the ground, which doesn't sound particularly safe. But without that extra weight, the balloon then would be able to ascend more freely. Now, I didn't read how the early balloons got back down, so I'm going to have to look at that one. Maybe that'll be for next week's sermon. But too much ballast, so here's some more science, too much ballast in a hot air balloon prevents it from rising up in the air, which again, you would figure that out, I suppose. And too little ballast will cause it to rise too quickly when you're heating up the air, and then contribute to the instability. So you always want to make sure that I was reading, I don't really remember the sandbags when I went up in a hot air balloon. It was years ago, but I'm glad they were there because they also provide stability in the basket just in case you hit something and then it doesn't tip. And then when you're first turning on the hot air to start that process, the basket can be tipping, and again, you've got people in there, so the sandbags are distributed so that it keeps that weight. There are some really interesting YouTube videos, if you're interested in this part of it, on ballast and how it is. I was going to show it, but I just figured if you're interested, you can do that. But it was very interesting, and just the mechanics as well of all of that. But anyway, so the use of ballast in a hot air balloon, again, keeps it from tipping even like in windy conditions. So not even while you're just filling up the balloon. If you want to rapidly gain altitude, again, it makes sense that you'd cut off that ballast, those sandbags, or really anything that you could use, I suppose, to lower your weight and gain altitude quickly. Well, I really liked this visual. And again, I just hadn't really noticed it. Maybe you had before. I mean, when you see pictures of hot air balloons, that you do see those bags hanging on the sides. But I love that idea of what is it that holds us down as well. So, we're thinking using this hot air balloon image of our prayers rising up to God and our actions and our thoughts, freeing us, hopefully, a little bit, maybe some of that tightness in our chests or that heaviness on our hearts, that maybe this Lent that will kind of free us up a little bit. But sometimes we carry around sandbags, right? We carry around lots of different things. And again, it makes sense in a lot of ways. Sometimes we can't help it. Sometimes circumstances are in our life or have been so recent that we feel like we're way down. And that makes total sense, and that's okay. But as we work through things, how wonderful is that God can take those weights off of us, so that we aren't feeling that weight, that we can carry, we don't have to carry that any longer. So they need to think sometimes of what are the things or the behaviors, the words that we use, our inner monologues that weigh us down, that keep that ballast on us, that just keeps us from soaring with God in faith and trust and hope. Jesus says again that we are meant to undergo great suffering, that he is, and that we also. So that can obviously make it even more difficult. Before this passage, again, it makes sense that Jesus is kind of now talking about all this. Jesus had just learned of the gruesome death of his cousin, John the Baptist, beheaded at the whims of the daughter of King Herod's wife. Tetrarch. So we can see again that Jesus, even though he was fully divine, he was also fully human. So it makes sense. I think that he would have some, and the word isn't really apprehension, I don't think. I thought of apprehension, but I don't think that's really what it is. But at the same time, knowing that he physically was going to go through that, he would also know then the future outcome. But still that apprehension maybe is the word of knowing what he would have to go through, the suffering. And again, he knew exactly what it was like, just like us, that he had a physical body. He knows what it's like to be hungry. He knows what it's like to feel in your heart when you grieve for someone. So he knows of all those different things and has experienced it himself. So again, I can imagine knowing that these things had to occur, even with the best of intentions that maybe Peter had, that he would be immediately shut Peter down, right? Kind of like, if someone says something to you and you just react, right? No, you don't understand. You don't understand what I'm going through. You don't understand what's happening. And maybe it's legitimate. Maybe they don't understand. They're trying to help you, and you're like, no. I know what's happening here. You don't know the whole situation. Here's what has to happen. And it's the same thing. Jesus knew and willingly put himself out there. And again, whether or not Peter's words are well-meaning or not, we all have a lot of ballast in our lives. And again, Peter not trusting, not knowing, so just kind of claiming, don't know Jesus, never mind, let's not go down that road. Letting fear dictate. In our reading today, Jesus also taught that we had a cross to take up as well. So weight in and of itself sometimes is not bad. Sometimes we need to shed that ballast, those extra sandbags, right? Of worry or whatever it is that's holding us down. But sometimes that weight is not a bad thing. Sometimes we need to add ballast for stability. We said that, right, in these hot air balloons. And sometimes we too are maybe too high up or too far removed from reality that we need some ballast to bring us down to earth. To bring us down to here's really what's happening. Maybe in my life, things I've had so easy. And okay, hang on a minute. This is really of what happens in life. Okay, I need to be able to handle that. I'm going to work through that. And again, it's not an easy thing. And it doesn't happen immediately. But that's why we have others in our lives to help us when we are weighed down in these situations. Jesus invites us to take up your cross. And again, it's not too far removed, though, from suffering or pain. Because we know that in the places of hardship is where Jesus is already at work. And that's difficult. I mean, none of us wish hardships on anybody else. Well, maybe if there's somebody you really, really dislike, I don't know, maybe you do. But I hope not, right? Because you know what that's like, because you've had hardship. And so to wish that on anyone else, that's why that's saying, I wouldn't wish this even on my worst enemy, right? That we are called instead to see the face of Jesus in all people, and that we then ourselves then can work through those times when, okay, this is horrible, I didn't want to be here, here I am in this situation, but whether it's immediately or whether it's down the road, that we can see Jesus working to help us repair our hearts, to help us repair our lives as we continue again to follow him. A life of discipleship, of following Jesus, consists of all those things, right? Joy and buoyancy, but also hardship and the weight of sorrow. So I think the art of all of life, right, is balance. How many times maybe do we as parents or grandparents maybe say that to our kids or grandkids or our students or other people, right? That things are about balance. I know we talk about that a lot at our house. That it can't always be just, woohoo, let's go to Disney World, right? That it also has to be, but then there's these other things in life that happen, and we have to deal with those. And we have to, to find God in those times. And again, I think for maybe many of us, we find that, yes, sometimes in those joys, the birth of a new child, that moment that we do absolutely are very close to God. But I think maybe for many of us, it's more the hardships, the times where we are at a loss. Lord, how do I get through this? That we do find that relationship with God, and again, it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes there's a time of anger and all those things first, and again, that's totally natural, and I think totally understood by Jesus as well. But that we can then find that balance through Jesus. Sometimes we have to let the weight go. Sometimes we have to hang on to that weight. And so the question then is, when do we need to carry the weight? And when do we need to let go of that weight? Most of us have sandbags in our lives that are keeping us from reaching our full potential. And so again, I'm kind of going different routes with this visual. But think about that. If you're just stuck with all your sandbags on your balloon, you're not going to go very far off the ground, right? So burdened by the things that are weighing us down, we kind of cruise at low altitudes near the ground, and we never can soar. The illustration of hot air balloons, again, is a great metaphor. So think about that for a second. The hot air, because remember, before they used to use different gases, but now it's just warm air that's heated with this big heater, and you're going to see pictures of that. You already saw one. You'll see another one later. But think about that you're in this balloon. The hot air that's being generated is the power of God within us. So we don't have a lot to do with it, right? We just, thankfully, God is there with his power. The balloon is us. And the sandbags are the things of the flesh that hold us down in life. Maybe being too worried about what other people think about us. Maybe being too worried about physical things, about material things that hold us down. Maybe it's different addictions that hold us down, that keeps us from using the power of God right there, that can lift us straight up to wonderful, beautiful things. So what sandbags are holding you down this morning? And again, maybe some of those sandbags just need to kind of stay there for a little while we're working through things. But there are some that I hope we can let go of sooner than later. One of them, it would be like self-doubt, self-loathing, unreasonable expectations. Maybe some of those things are things we can just right now or during our time of prayer here in a minute, just say, Lord, just let me let go of this stuff. Let me let go of this. We need to release the idea that we are unworthy, because we talked last week too, right? Jesus said, you are my beloved. Jesus says that to every one of us. So whatever those sandbags are that are really not helping us in our lives and maybe never have, and they're things we started when we were little and have kept those beliefs about ourselves. Yeah, we need to be honest. Yeah, we mess up. But we also need to be able to say, God, you love me. I need to be able to love me too. And we'll gain strength. Again, being able to carry that cross, knowing that we are worthy of God's love and that God loves us so much that he's going to walk right beside us every step of the way with that cross. May it be so. Amen.